the Center for Advanced Strategic Studies, and Jal Mahajan in particular, for giving me this opportunity to express my views on a very, very important, extremely relevant and contemporary topic as part of Brigadier N.B. Grant Memorial Lecture. Speaking at memorial lectures is always challenging because the standards set by them are extremely high. So I salute the legacy of late Brigadier N.B. Grant. It's also very humbling to see so many senior veterans here who've been role models. On personal front, I've learned a lot from them. And I think it's an apt opportunity for me to thank them for their contribution to the Indian Army and also to the nation. In fact, there are two predecessors of my various appointments here, and I'm glad that they are here. And there are various comrades in arms also here. It's good to see the students also and the younger officers. But then this combination actually has made the task even more challenging. When I started working on this topic, I made it quite official or officious looking sort of script. But when I came to know that the students are also going to be here, I had to make it a little more engaging. So we'll see how it actually progresses. Now let me begin with a simple question. What makes an army truly powerful? Is it sheer the numbers? Is it only the bravery? Or is it the weapons that the army holds? The answer lies in one word: capability. Now, capability is not just the ability to fight, but it is the power to win at least cost, in shortest possible time, and in the toughest conditions. And there is no doubt about this in this particular gathering. Capability development per se is not just a buzzword. It is knowledge, it's holistic. Knowledge, acquiring cutting edge equipment, training on it, ensuring our soldiers are future ready, etc., etc. Even the human resource management. But then, for the Indian Army, capability development is all about one thing: winning wars before they even begin. And that's where we are supposed to reach. Where does it start? With the equipment. The tanks, the guns, the radars, the drones, technology-enabled platforms, etc., etc. And capital procurement is the foundation of this particular equipment, or getting this equipment to us. Without the right equipment, even the bravest of the soldiers will be handicapped in the battlefield. And since there are some students also here, I've structured it in a manner that by the end of this talk, you will see how this process works, why it matters, where the opportunities lie, despite the challenges. Now, the world around us is changing faster than ever. Geopolitics, technology, warfare, geostrategy. We are aware of the sanctions, tariffs, etc., etc. Everything affects capability development. So, to stay ahead of this curve, or at least to catch up, India has created integrated capability development system as part of the DAP 2020. We'll just come to this DAP 2020 a little later. Think of it as a master plan that ensures that Army, Navy and Air Force don't work in silos, but as one integrated war machine, and optimize resources, including during procurement process. And at the heart of this system are a few documents. The perspective plans, the long term, mid term and the short term, which are nothing else but the ICDP, DCAP and the annual acquisition plan, AAP. and a document called as the Technology Perspective and Capability Roadmap, often ignored. But it's a document that tells the industry, that tells the world what the armed forces will need in the coming years. So for entrepreneurs, startups, scientists, roadmap is nothing less than a treasure map or treasure hunt. This is the broad organization at the national level that is responsible for procurements. We will not dwell over this. Just remember that it is the acquisition wing of the Ministry of Defense and Department of Defense which is responsible for acquisition. Now, who drives this process in the Indian Army? It is the Deputy Chief of Army Staff, Capability Development and Sustenance. Now, his office is the nerve center, coordinating it with ministries, industries, research agencies, academia, and with the agencies within the Indian Army. But what is the rule book by which they have to go? That is the Defense Acquisition Procedure 2020 or DAP 2020, which I just mentioned a few moments back. Now, it's just not a policy document, but it's a playbook that defines how India buys its weapons and from whom. Since its publication in 2020, it has undergone a few amendments for the better. Now, this DAP 2020 also lays down some guiding principles for acquisition or procurements, and many opportunities emerge from them, whether it is indigenization, indigenous content being more than 50%, level playing field, etc., etc. So everyone has got opportunities in this. And now this is where that publication becomes more interesting. Acquisitions are not one size fits all. They fall into various categories. And what are they? We briefly mentioned here. We'll take only few. First is the Buy Indian IDDM. We know what is Buy, we know what is IDDM, but IDDM. Indigenously designed, developed and manufactured. So manufactured in India and indigenously designed and developed. Has to have minimum 50% indigenous content on cost basis of the base contract price. Buy Indian is the next category. They are marked serial 1 and 2 also. Made in India, even if not designed here, but with minimum 60% indigenous content. So anyone who is in Buy Indian IDDM category or any industry which is part of that Buy Indian IDDM category, which we just spoke a little while back, can also participate in this with 50% indigenous content because that is designed, developed and manufactured in India. The next category is Buy and Make Indian. Deals with a partnership. Buy a few units from abroad, then manufacture the rest in India with minimum 50% indigenous content. Alongside, they should have technology transfer for critical parts. Next is Make categories. So far we were talking of Buy. That is something which may be already available. Now we are talking of Make. It's making something. So now Make category is where innovation thrives. This is for all those rear rows. From government funded prototypes to industry driven solutions and import substitution. The Make categories aim to achieve self-reliance by involving greater participation of Indian industrial and innovation ecosystem. And when I talk of innovation ecosystem, it's the students, the academia, the scientists, the research organizations, the research institutes, academic institutes, industry in any case comes into it, startups, MSMEs, and we all. So that is the innovation ecosystem that one is talking of. Now, this is through the procedures of make 1, 2 and 3. There are slight differences which are very clear here, but I'll just go over them. These are the projects involving design and development of equipment, systems, major platforms or upgrades thereof by the Indian industry. For projects under make 1 category or a subcategory, the Ministry of Defence also funds it up to 70% of its prototype development cost. Just for the rear rose, prototype is the first of its model that it produces. So if the requirement is, let's say, 100 crores, 70% of that can come from the Ministry of Defence. Or up to 250 crores maximum, but that limit is not 250 crores. On case-to-case basis, that can further be increased. So it's partially funded by the government. And why is it partially funded? Because the one who's developing it needs to have some ownership of it. Now, Make 2 projects also include design and development and innovative solutions by an Indian agency for which no government funding is provided. Maybe because it's a suo motu proposal which has come from the industry or an individual, and they feel that they can make it through their own contributions. Now, if a solution has been offered even by a single individual or a firm as a suo motu proposal, the case may be progressed as a resultant single vendor case under Make 2. Now, items under Make 3 subcategory, although may not be designed and developed indigenously, but are to be manufactured in India as import substitution for product support of weapon systems and equipment held in the inventory of services. So again, Indian industry can get into partnerships with the foreign OEMs and have the transfer of technology. There were other categories also, which we are not going to discuss, but each category is a doorway for industry, startups and innovators to step in. Now, we have only understood the categories, but what happens thereafter? What is the process involved? So, understanding this process is also essential. And I have tried to simplify it for everyone. Imagine the acquisition process as a relay race. It is sequential in nature. First, at the bottom is request for information or RFI, asking the industry what is possible, what can they give, what can they make. Making GSQR, or just take it as qualitative requirements, defining what the army needs. So based on what is possible, what army needs. Acceptance of necessity. So someone at a authority gives an approval. So that's an official approval that okay, you can progress this. Next is the request for proposal or RFP. Nothing else but people can understand it as a detailed tender. Evaluations, trials, negotiations. Involves testing every claim on paper, on ground, that is by on field, and by inspection. Needless to say, followed by cost negotiations. And contract signing is the finishing line. But it doesn't end there. So contract sign is after the approval of CFA, Competent Financial Authority. And post the contract starts the PCM or post contract management for timely delivery and sustenance, so that the utility of the equipment remains high class throughout its life cycle. So it's rigorous, yes, but it ensures that when a soldier gets a weapon, it works flawlessly in the harshest of the battlefields. Why have I used the word harshest? Because we have temperatures of more than 50 degrees in the deserts and as cold as -40 or -50 degrees in the Siachen. Now let's talk about innovation. If you are a startup with a brilliant idea, or just an individual with a brilliant idea, a scientist with a breakthrough, you have a product at some TRL level. We'll come to TRL levels also. You want to understand how your idea will work in field, and hence you want to go to the forward areas or the field areas. You have an idea for a smaller product which can fit into a bigger product or a bigger system, and want to see how it can function into that. You want to conduct a trial of your equipment or a product and need the correct place to go and do the trials. Going further, if you actually need an equipment or at times even ammunition to test your product, where do you go? You go to the Army Design Bureau, the Army's Innovation Hub, established in 2017. It is the bridge between the Army and the nation's innovators, or the innovative or innovation ecosystem that we call it. And primarily here is what they do. They act as the primary interface between the industry and Indian Army, organize forward area tours so innovators can see the battlefield firsthand. They already conducted 26 forward area tours of about more than or close to 300 people from industry and academia. They have physically taken them to forward areas along the line of control, line of actual control, or western side or eastern side, and made them understand what is the equipment functioning under, what are the conditions. They also evaluate the equipment. So far they have evaluated 369 equipment, out of which 98 equipment worth about 3,700 crores have already been procured. So ADB is the proof that Army is not just a consumer of technology, but it's a partner in innovation. ADB helps the innovators, startups, industry to fund and develop a product through many routes. I always get confused, routes or routes. These days people call it routes, more westernized, but then whatever it is. Such as ATB or the Army Technology Board, TDF or the Technology Development Fund, IDEX or MAKE. MAKE we have already spoken about, MAKE 1, 2, 3. ATB, TDF and IDEX, I am not going to go into too many details, but suffice to say, you have an innovation, approach the ADB, they'll guide you where to go and how much funding can be made available. And down below are the TRL levels which are given. Wherever you are, you can just take it forward. I'll just briefly flash the ADB's leaflet, one leaflet that they have published, just extracts of that, and everything is given in this. The ADB also takes forward the ideas and innovations of serving personnel also. There are a few Indian Army personnel who have developed niche technologies. Sorry, the photograph is very small. They have developed that product, tested it in the field, IPR obtained. The technology has been transferred to industry, and then the production is commenced, and Army is taking those products now. ADB or the Army Design Bureau actually helps you also get the IPR. In fact, they get it for you. And what a coincidence that we are in the BEG or in the setup of an engineers, and this officer that I am referring to is an engineer's officer. Some of you may already be aware of that. So it's not just one case, there are many. Now, let's be honest. Defense procurement is not easy. The key issues are, it's time consuming, equipment must last for at least 10 to 15 years or more, Technology transfer often faces delays. Testing facilities are limited. Decision making is centralized. Indigenous industry is growing, but how does it compare with the international peers? So all these are the issues that are involved in procurement. Let me explain a bit more in detail. Now, these are the environmental realities through which the Indian Army must meander and progress acquisitions. All these pose challenges in the acquisition process. Needless to say, we talked of harshest battlefield, etc., etc. So, Indian Army needs robust and rugged equipment. Equipment with life of up to even 40 to 50 years. Such equipment is costly, and so there is obvious caution at every stage, and many times too much of it. Because of the nature of the equipment is seldom readily available. You can't just go and pick up 10 pieces and come back. So it's seldom available. Because the requirement is driven by multitude of terrain configurations and also the operational roles. Moreover, we saw procurements are process driven, sequential in nature. So deviations are seldom, except for emergency procurements. Again, they too are very formalized deviations, but their emergency procurements can only fill in the immediate operational voids. Focus is, we talked of make and buy, Indian IDDM, etc., etc. So the focus is on procurement of indigenous products, which are a result of make or design and development or research and development procedures. Such procedures have long gestation period. Add to that the tussle among Indian Army's desire, availability, and industry's aspirations. Add to that decision making, which is challenging, especially with so many stakeholders. We saw that deputy chief in the center and so many agencies. So any decision to deviate is centralized. Now, Indian defense industry, whether it is DPSUs or the private Indian defense industry, they have made tremendous progress and we are proud of it. But for the world, it is still nascent. There is tremendous scope for improvement, in which itself lies more opportunity. There are success stories, needless to say. But despite that, indigenization, transfer of technology, consortiums are still to meet expectations. Hardly any consortium has actually seen the light of the day. Correct me if I am wrong. There are giant industries which got together as a consortium, it failed. %90 of the AI workloads are still on foreign servers and chips from abroad, exposing risks in data sovereignty, latency, and disruptions. Shortage of critical parts of major equipment still persists despite all this indigenization and the progress. Why? I'll come to it a little later. This is further compounded by production shortfalls and geopolitical supply chain issues. We've seen it very recently. We talked of transfer of technology. Even when the DRDO transfers technology, there are gaps in communication, mismatched perspectives, and bureaucratic hurdles. Thus, the project timelines get extended by years. So, while there are some inefficiencies this side, industry too, there are issues. 60 to 70%, or let's say more than 50% of nominated industries fail to absorb transfer of technology on time due to inexperience with military tolerances, absence of metallurgy, non-destructive testing facilities, and specialized infrastructure. among some of the industries, MSMEs, and of course startups. Again, this results in over-reliance on a few DPSUs, which becomes a challenge. We are aware of CDS's recent remarks. Industry, DPSUs, DRDO. Overpromise, underdeliver, do not deliver on time. This not only affects capability development, but also the budget booking. Many people, many times hear, the Indian Army has not been able to book the budget. Now, booking of budget is not only Indian Army's responsibility. It is the industry, the DPSU, everyone who contributes to it. Because the order given today or the contract done today actually fructifies over next 10 years. So if that order is worth 10,000 crore rupees, those 10,000 rupees can be booked over the next 10 years. So if you don't deliver, part of it is not given. So that is not booked. So the rear rows must understand this. There is also a fear of single order dependency. There is the fear amongst especially the smaller industries, MSMEs, startups. Now this leads to again repeated 2 to 4 year delays in component manufacturing, forcing continued imports and again falling back to DPSUs or foreign suppliers. And that's where that point is there that we still have to get over import substitution. A weak and risk-averse lower tier ecosystem remains a roadblock to genuine indigenization and timely capability building of Indian Army. Normally, you all hear only the giant industries participating in this, which is true. But then, do they only manufacture everything? They have the sub or the lower tier vendors. So this lower tier ecosystem also has to come up. One of my friend is now working in the industry. So he has come out with this data. General Vasudesh Arya. Barely 800 to 1000 active tier 2 or tier 3 industries exist against a required of at least 8,000 to 10,000. So obviously the demand is more, the supply is less. Testing facilities we talked of. There are testing facilities, but the existing DGQA testing facilities or other testing facilities created by NABL or NABL accredited facilities, though have expanded and are now open to even private defense industry, are still limited. Many existing ones are outdated. Their scheduling needs to be far more efficient to avoid equipment transportation across the country and at times then abroad, thus prolonging that certification process, because every component that you manufacture has to undergo a certification process. Centralized decision making and process driven procurements lead to obvious delays. Now, though the Atmanirbharta is the buzzword, development of niche technologies is time consuming. But world over, technology is galloping. So capability development cannot and should not wait for the time required to reach self-reliance. Now, hence it is challenging for the Indian Army or the armed forces to achieve this healthy balance. Capability development has to progress on one side. You have to take care of the Atmanirbharta also. So that is where the challenge lies. Involvement of multiple stakeholders and oversights, though essential, leads to delays. Now we discussed various categories like Buy Indian, IDDM, Buy Indian and Make. So it is this categorization which also becomes a challenge at times. We saw what was RFI, asking the industry what you can give, what you can make. And based on that, we form the QRs. So we are not saying that, okay, This is what is available world over, so we only want this. There are compromises being made by the armed forces as well. And industry says yes, DRDO says yes, and hence the QRs are made. But many times what has been observed is whatever is promised as part of response to the request for information and response to the RFP is not realized. It leads to lowering of the qualitative requirements and obvious delays. Delays why? Because firstly the requirements have to be met. If they cannot be met, changes have to be made in that categorization. And we saw decision making is centralized, so obvious delays. Towards the end of the procurement cycle, finances also play an important role, which are dependent on the inputs from certain stakeholders, which takes time. In my view, the acquisition wing, we saw a chart dealing with capital procurement at national level, and we talked of acquisition wing, or I stressed on acquisition wing. In my view, acquisition wing needs to enhance its capacity to handle more contracts in a financial year. But now here is the twist. Every challenge is also an opportunity. It's always easy to identify drawbacks, challenges, etc. But there are opportunities. The picture is not so bleak. Every coin has two sides. In this case, the other side of the coin is opportunities. Now, this is an indicative list of technologies that are being sought by the armed forces world over, and so by the Indian armed forces as well. I only listed a few. This list cannot be comprehensive. I mean, if one wants to list out all the technologies, this space will be far restricted or less. But then this is where the opportunities for all lie. If everyone or anyone says, I can do this, please do it, come up with it. So every field there are opportunities. The defense budget this year has grown by nearly 9.5%. India's defense industry is booming. Defense exports have jumped from a mere about 1,500 crores in, I think, 16-17 to 23,000 plus crores in 24-25. The continued unrest of our borders, on our borders, transformation of our military, continued impetus towards Atmanirbharta, and the capacity to provide economic solutions in defense equipment are some of the contributing factors which are going to fuel the growth of our defense ecosystem in the next decade. So capacity, we do have the capacity to provide economic solutions, but the solutions have to come up. The biggest opportunity, the shift from buy global to buy Indian. In both AONs, this is what is the AONs, we talked of official approval. See the balance now between red and blue. Also in the contracts. So these are the contracts over the years, recent few years. See the shift between red, blue and also white or off-white. A white here. So this, that buy global to buy Indian is just not a policy. It's sort of a revolution of sorts. And private industry now has a level playing field with the DPSUs. Startups, MSME, academia, all have a role to play. The Buy Indian policy prioritizes local defense systems and equipment. This has led to reduction in defense imports or the shift of procurement from foreign industry to Indian manufacturers. Now, this is what depicts, I spoke very briefly about budget utilization. In the recent past, we have started over-utilizing our budget. So budget, and there is always criticism, why is our budget not 2% of GDP, etc., etc. Budget is not a constraint if you have the capacity to expend it. And that's where I said that acquisition wing needs to enhance its capacity to write or conclude more contracts in a year. We have overexpended. Money has come. This way also, in 24-25, the contracts are far more, but the money will come as and when the booking starts. A question is often asked by the people or that innovation ecosystem that I can do something, but how do I know what the armed forces need? The answer is TPCR. TPCR is your guide. It's published every 5 years. This is a copy on the internet of 2025 publication. On the right hand side, I have just taken an extract of one equipment for everyone's knowledge. So it names the equipment, it names or it identifies what is the life cycle span that the army is looking at. Who should be contacted in the Indian Army or the ADB? As also, most importantly, what are the broad parameters or the preferred technologies which are supposed to be there? We saw the list of so many technologies. Some of them can come here. So this is how you can actually come to know. Now, fueled by government's push for indigenization, Indian Army personnel, the private industry, companies, startups, academic institutions must seize these opportunities and benefit from this modernization drive across multiple domains of warfare and develop next generation military technologies. Now, I have not gone into the details of opportunities because of the defense industrial corridors or the Gati Shakti, etc. That's another chapter. But if you want to, it's all available on the internet. One can explore and identify opportunities from them as well. Now, for the army, opportunities mean better weapons, smarter systems, and battlefield dominance. For the industry, it means growth, innovation, and nation building. How? By indigenization, indigenous defense manufacturing, research and development, innovation, establishing joint ventures, enhancing our capacity and capability to absorb transfer of technologies, and most importantly, while we are going forward, we cannot forget the basics. Most importantly, by evolving basic technologies locally. For instance, metallurgy. We hardly have good metallurgy. Correct me if I am wrong. High strength alloys. So while things can get manufactured in India, but these things have to come from outside. Recovering, I am not even talking of manufacturing or extracting rare earths materials, but recovering rare earths metals from the e-waste. Just some few aspects that came to my mind. To conclude, capability development is not just about the weapons. It's about the strategic autonomy. About ensuring that when the soldier stands guard at the border, he holds in his hands a weapon or a weapon system made in India, tested in India, and perfected in India. Yes, there are challenges, delays, bureaucracy, supply chain issues. But we have these issues even in our homes. Don't we get over them? So we have to make those efforts at the institutional level also to get over them. But despite the challenges, I feel the opportunities far outweigh them. With patience, innovation, collaboration, reforms. Reforms is very important, and they are ongoing. India can actually build a digitally networked, multi-domain capable army. So I leave you with this thought. Capability development is not the army's job alone. It is a nation's collective mission, and every one of you, whether in industry, academia or uniform, has a role to play. I stop here.